Hi. I think it's safe to say that collectively, we're relatively obsessed with true crime. But some stories, they never made the headlines. They didn't get podcasts, or Netflix deals, or trial coverage. And not because they weren't horrifying, but because somebody made sure they stayed hidden. And what happened during Hurricane Katrina inside the prison walls of New Orleans is one of those stories. I think for me, besides just the absolute magnitude of how horrific the story is, it's also been really heavy on my mind recently because I live in a Gulf Coast state and it's nearly hurricane season again. And probably, just like you, I've been seeing the stories of the 10 escaped inmates from Orleans Parish Prison all over my social media and all over the news. And that just really drives it home how little coverage the prison story from Katrina really received. For me, when I think of Hurricane Katrina, I guess for everybody, our minds often drift to the images that dominated headlines. The rooftop rescues in a wholly flooded New Orleans, makeshift shelters in the Superdome, and the unimaginable devastation left behind. I can also remember hearing reports of helicopters trying to help, but being faced with gunshots from looters. But apparently that story, it might not even be true. But I guess that's a tangent for another time. So I think what rarely comes to mind for people is what happened inside Orleans Parish Prison during those fateful days. This is not just a story of neglect, it's a story of abandonment on a catastrophic scale. One that has remained buried in the shadows for nearly 2 decades. So, on August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall, devastating New Orleans and claiming over 1,100 lives. Most victims were poor, they were minorities, and they were left behind as the city drowned. But among those forgotten were the 6,000 inmates locked inside Orleans Parish Prison. Over 6,000 inmates were locked in their cells. No food, no water, no working toilets, no electricity. It was Louisiana in August. Conditions became really bad, really fast. And there was no plan to evacuate them, no preparation for their survival at all. The storm hit, and when the levees broke, the prison became a tomb. Again, the jail lost power, water, plumbing, air circulation. And for 4 days, these men were left trapped in cells as floodwaters rose around them. I mean, imagine standing in chest-deep water mixed with raw sewage, chemicals, and decomposing bodies, all while screaming for help that took days and days to come. There's reports from survivors that paint a chilling picture. Inmates desperately setting fires, hanging signs from barred windows, and banging on walls in a hopeless plea for rescue. Some tried to swim through the flooded corridors, while others were forced to drink contaminated water just to stay alive. This wasn't negligence. It was systematic failure at its very worst. And let me be crystal clear. There was time to evacuate, time to get a plan in place. The warnings came days in advance. Katrina was headed straight for New Orleans. The city had already issued a mandatory evacuation days before it. Hospitals began clearing out, nursing homes arranged transport, other towns had evacuated their jails, and I mean the zoo evacuated its animals ahead of the storm. Thank goodness. But I mean, what? How is no similar care extended to the human beings inside OPP? The Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office made absolutely no effort to evacuate prisoners prior to the storm, despite full knowledge of the threat posed by Katrina. When the guards fled, they left booking records, identification documents, and entire cell blocks behind. Some inmates, I guess they managed to escape amid the chaos. And on that 4th day, when the National Guard arrived to help evacuate the inmates, some were transferred to secret makeshift detention centers like Camp Greyhound, where conditions were equally appalling, while others were just handcuffed in parking lots or under overpasses. I mean, truly abhorrent conditions. Reportedly, some were also transferred to other jails outside of New Orleans, but hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds, they simply vanished. To this day, there's still no official death toll. Seriously, we are approaching the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and somehow there's still been no official death toll of the inmates inside OPP. No death toll, no missing persons record, no real reports, not with tangible numbers and names at all. Hundreds were just unaccounted for. Some are still missing. And what makes this even more horrifying is the fact that the majority of those 6,000 inmates had not even been convicted of a crime. Yeah, nearly 80% were awaiting trial, held for nonviolent offenses like trespassing, unpaid fines, marijuana possession, or like traffic fines. They were legally innocent, but were treated as expendable during one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. You have to remember, OPP was not a state prison. It was just a local jail, primarily for short-term holds and pre-trial detention. But in the situation, those trials never came. Some inmates were also just teenagers, just left, locked in their cells. I can't even really think about that. Can you think about anything more frightening than knowing a Category 5 hurricane is about to slam down on you and you're locked inside a cell with no help in sight, no guards, no deputies, no keys, no food or water? I can't imagine really anything scarier. And after the horrors of the storm passed, for those survivors, the families of the survivors, or the families of the missing or the dead, I guess I'll get to that. But in the aftermath of Katrina, New Orleans, it wasn't just underwater. It was fully paralyzed. Courts were shut down, records were destroyed, and families were displaced. So many people had lost everything, their homes, their possessions, literally everything. So the usual avenues for seeking justice, they were closed off. Many families didn't even know if their loved ones were alive. And those who tried to demand answers, they were met with only silence. But the larger truth lies in the identities of these inmates. They were overwhelmingly poor, they were minorities, and they were marginalized. In the eyes of society, they weren't seen as victims deserving of compassion. Their stories were erased before they could even be told. Yeah, there was no Dateline coverage. There wasn't a Netflix documentary. Just silence. Still. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, the lack of accountability is staggering. To this day, we don't know how many died, how many escaped, or how many were secretly transferred. Testimonies of victims describe beatings, starvation, and abuse. But not one, no guards, no deputies, or any official has come forward to take any amount of responsibility. And what's even crazier and more disturbing is the continued tenure of Marlin Gusman. He was the sheriff who oversaw the prison during Katrina. He remained in power there for 16 more years, over a decade, despite the allegations of systematic misconduct and negligence. Not one whistleblower stepped up, not one official apologized. Instead, the city moved on as if those 6,000 lives were a footnote in the larger tragedy of Katrina. It's impossible not to wonder if those 6,000 people had been hospital patients, tourists, or school children. Would their suffering have been so easily ignored? If they had been middle-class homeowners or professionals, would their stories have been forgotten so quickly? There's no way. That would have been a billion-dollar mistake. Money from lawsuits, money from story deals, testimonials, you name it, money, money, money. But in this case, the answer is painfully clear. These were people society already undervalued. Unconvicted inmates, disproportionately poor and Black, their lives weren't prioritized before the storm, and their deaths barely registered after it. The horror that unfolded inside Orleans Parish Prison during Hurricane Katrina is more than just a cautionary tale. It's an indictment of a system that dehumanizes the most vulnerable among us. and yet the silence surrounding their suffering persists. This isn't about reliving trauma for shock value. It's about remembering the lives lost and holding those in power accountable for their failures. It's about shining a light on the stories that were buried, intentionally or otherwise, and refusing to let the world forget that these atrocities, they actually happened. For the survivors, the families searching for answers, and for all those who never made it out of OPP, their stories matter. Even if justice feels like a distant dream, their stories, they shouldn't be silenced. Because some stories, they demand to be told. And this is one of them. I don't know. Thanks for hanging out and listening. Thanks for watching until the end. My next video is actually also about another rarely talked about travesty that happened during Hurricane Katrina. And then after that, I have some stories about schools, and then some community stories, poisoning story, I don't know, a bunch of things, some more prison stories. There's a lot to come. So please subscribe and stick around. And if there's anything that you think, would be perfect for this channel for me to do a video on or dig into, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, again, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. My name's Caroline, and this is Hidden Headlines.